Hello everyone, welcome to a very special evening presentation of Hue at Home. I'm Tracy Koga, and we just want to say congratulations to all of the graduates of 2021 and the students who have passed and going on to their next grade in the fall. Congratulations to all of you. It has been an incredible year, and for those of you that have seen it through, it has been, wow, what a roller coaster ride. And we're going to be talking about education tonight. We're going to hear from students, parents, educators, people that are working with peer support for mental health, and figure out what possibly could happen over the summer, Bill 64, and then heading back to school in the fall. What is that going to look like? All right, so let's open the doors to our panelists. We've got such an incredible array of people here tonight, and I was really impressed on the conversations that everybody wanted to have. And look at all the faces. Hello, hello, everybody. You're all on mute. So good to see you. Hi, Felicity. Thank you so much. And welcome, Dami, to this special night. We definitely want to hear from you, too. Hi, Judy Ann. Hi, Mrs. Baxter. But you're going to be Linda tonight, okay? Oh, and hi, Fiona. Thank you so much for coming. We're probably going to have a few more joining us shortly, but you know what? I want to start maybe with you, Judy Ann. I had just sort of in my opening saying congratulations to all of the graduates in 2021 and the students that are moving forward, going to the next grade. But for you, you're a support teacher. What has it been like since, and I'm going to say it, since 2020, right? It hasn't really changed.
It hasn't. So I think there's just been a lot of resilience is what we're seeing. A lot of having to be flexible and responsive to what the students need. And that looks different building to building, that looks different classroom to classroom. I think everyone's just been doing their best. And yeah, from 2020, we kind of had that nice little moment where we're back together, but a lot of that time too is preparing for just in case. And I'm glad that we did, because when the time came, we were able to do that pivot within, I think it was 48 hours that we were needing to do that switch. So having the students feel more confident in connecting online was a huge focus for us.
Mentally, though, I guess, Judy Ann, what has been sort of the climate, I guess, for teachers, for educators on a whole?
It's definitely been, I guess, stressful would be the word that I hear. Exhausted is a lot, because on top of just education, there's a lot of things as well going on for our division and others behind the scenes that we've also had to deal with. So there's just been a lot on teachers' plate. And I think, we have next week is our last week of school, and I think it's a well-deserved break for everyone at this point to just kind of kick back and just take a deep breath, because I think we really haven't had an opportunity to do that like since last year. Really, it's just been a lot of having to pivot on a dime, really.
Oh, no kidding. And how has it been too, like for the teachers to get onto that virtual wagon, right? And I guess trying to have that connection with students, it must be like incredibly hard.
It is. With what I found this year too is when I was in schools, we have had to do the pivot a couple of times where I'm coming in for literacy support or numeracy support. And all of a sudden I'm helping a new teacher learn how to do remote learning for the first time. And how do you teach remotely? How do you even set up a schedule for your learners for a week to make it consistent? So there's been a lot of just having to change that. But it is getting them on the bandwagon. I think people forget that there are brand new teachers or teachers who were on leave last year who didn't have to do remote teaching at all. And to come back now in September, or I guess October, when we did that first Code Orange switch, and then just that constantly changing every week. You don't really know when your students are coming back, if they're coming back. So there's just been a lot of having to support teachers who have never done it before. But it is very heartwarming to see the teachers who did do this last year, just kind of take them under their wing, give them some tips, give them their schedule. Like, this is how I set it up. It might work for you, it might not, but come ask me questions if you need any advice, for sure.
So many things. Well, we're going to come back to you, Judy Ann, because I did want to talk too about your role as a support teacher and what supports are going to look like moving forward. But I want to introduce everybody to Fiona. Fiona, you probably know a lot of these faces. And I love your title, Healthy Mind Specialist. And boy, oh boy, Does that ever take a new meaning over this whole pandemic?
Absolutely. I don't actually know a lot of these folks. I know some of the folks, but I don't know everyone, that's for sure. But thank you so much for having me. I am, as Tracy said, I'm the Healthy Mind Specialist for Winnipeg School Division. So I have a really unique position in the province. There's not too many folks that have these positions within school. So I'm very fortunate. So really just focusing on the mental health and wellness of our students, staff, and our caregivers in our community. So looking at all the different ways that we could build capacity and support the mental health and wellness of all those folks. So it's been a very interesting, difficult, also a really amazing time to see what people, the resilience and how folks have come together to support one another. So yeah, it has been a year, that's for sure. So thank you for having me.
Oh no, so Fiona, I want to ask, how different is 2021 from 2020?
Well, I mean, 2020 was also challenging because we found COVID. I think for me, and the important thing that I keep saying is we've all been in this fight, as probably many of you have been, for a really long time with respect to advocating for mental health supports and resources. And as most folks know, Manitoba, we have a very different demographic than a lot of other places in Canada. We have the highest rates of suicide amongst our youth. We have higher rates of substance misuse. We have we have highest rates of child welfare. So we've already been having a lot of concerns pre-COVID, and then COVID just came and it just exacerbated what was already there. So this year has been extremely challenging, to say the least. I think we have seen all the resources too that folks would generally go to. I mean, who would have ever thought even McDonald Youth Services Brief Therapy would say, no, we're full. Like, we are at 150% capacity. We can't, that's a lot of families' very last support, trying to find a counselor in the community for free, almost impossible. Even trying to find somebody that you could pay for is almost impossible. So the resources are tapped to the max. Folks are tapped to the max. So it has been really, really difficult for everyone to be able to get the supports that they needed. And we have seen higher and higher and more exacerbated rates of, mental health issues and students and families requiring supports and really just not being able to get them. Like, places like Psych Health for our youth, we're talking a year wait. And that is so not okay. And I really don't think people know, I don't think the community knows what it really, really looks like until you're trying to access that system. And it is it's devastating. So it's been very, very challenging. It's been very hard. Teachers, school staff, all those folks have been doing amazing, but you're starting to see, it's taken a toll on everybody, right? So it has been probably the most challenging time. I've been a social worker for over 20 years. This has been it. This has been the most challenging time that I have seen. And it's been probably most devastating because all the supports and resources we would usually rely upon are not there. They're just simply not there. And so a lot of people are left with absolutely nothing. And that has been tragic.
Oh.
I don't want to be the downer, but it's true.
No, but this is what this whole kind of conversation is about, is like, how has it really been? Because nobody else will get that picture, right? And so, and yeah, and what can we do moving forward? So I want to get into that because that is shocking to me too. And then we have some wonderful mental health peer support workers that I'm sure their ears are perking up. So there's a lot of work to be done. I want to introduce everybody to Felicity and Dami. They're grade 12 students from Glen Lawn Collegiate. And wow, I say congratulations to both of you, but not the grad celebration, right, that you anticipated, right, Felicity?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was really a lot of unknowns along the way. Like, just, grad was always in our minds just from the very, very start of the school year. And, as we approached that day, the anxieties that everyone had kind of heightened. And then there was also this, up and down with the spikes of the cases. And so right now it's just, I feel like a lot of us are just trying to accept it, that, okay, this is what's happening. We have to make the best out of it, right? And I think that same attitude also goes for what we experience in the school year. I mean, at times we were remote, at times we were in class, and there are different pros and cons to those. But really, at the heart of it, we just had to buckle up and accept it. So that's how I personally felt about that. I know it might have been harder for others or easier for others, but that's my perspective. I just felt like, we have to carry on.
Dami, what have you learned through all of this? What were some of the challenges you faced?
Before quarantine, I was in almost every club. I go home like every night at like 8:30. I had volunteering, and all of a sudden, I'm not allowed to do anything, and it was so depressing. Because at the beginning, I was like, you know what, it's the time to cool down. You know, university is coming. Maybe I should just like come down and do all my work. But like, it went on for so long that like I even stopped doing my work because I was so unmotivated. And again, like when I said, I don't want to be the downer, but like I know other family like had troubles because like breadwinners like couldn't go to work. So I felt like my problems weren't important enough to like talk to other people about. But like it was stressful. Like my mom works and she's a single mom, and the idea of that, and she's a support worker. So with that anxiety, oh, something might happen to her, and then I can get a job, so I can even support her if something did happen to her. And high school and university coming on the way, and it was all of this stress coming together, and it just I think I went into like a really bad depression for like months. So yeah, I do like it was tough. Yeah, it was like really stressful.
And that's just so not fair for a young person like yourself to be having to face these challenges. But, you've probably grown through all of this too, Dami, right?
I mean, I have no choice but to grow with the time and the responsibility now. So yeah, I am in a way grateful because there's some stuff that I would have learned about myself if it wasn't for the quarantine and the time alone. So I do appreciate it, but I'd rather not that happen again.
No, no. So, what are plans for both of you after grade 12?
Trying to get a
Well,
job,
yeah.
high school, high school, university.
Well, personally, I'm headed off to Vancouver. I got accepted to the University of British Columbia, so that's where I'm headed
Yay.
after this, which, that's a really, really exciting. That's what I've wanted since I was in grade 10. But there are also the anxieties, definitely being quarantined for such a long time. And that means I spent so much time with my family this time. And so I would say I'm actually closer to them now than I ever was. Um, but then I have to move away in the future, and so I kind of have fears about that. I'll be living with my grandmother, but so that's nice that I have someone, a close relative that I can just have as a kind of a constant. But being away from my family for the first time, and especially during a pandemic, it is kind of worrying. But I personally think I just have to stay optimistic, and at least things won't be as online as they are. I'm hoping by then there's more in-person activity, and so I feel like I'll be more in the mindset to just go and be more positive about everything.
Oh, yes. Dami, what would you like to do? What kind of work?
I was actually looking into social work, but now I'm looking into maybe nonprofit, maybe studying like business or something. Um, in the Nigerian community, your family, your parents choose what you get to do. So, like, honestly, passionately, I really want to do social work, but business is what I applied for in university now. So that's what I'm.
Oh, well, we look forward to that, and congratulations again. We're going to get back to you too when we start talking a little bit more about, I guess, the future and what university even looks like too. I would like now to introduce a very special person. I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag. She was my former elementary teacher, and we just got reacquainted when a friend of mine connected us because I wanted to do this special. And lo and behold, we had a wonderful conversation. And I did not know everything that she did beyond being Mrs. Baxter, at a wonderful elementary school teacher, but she instilled a lot of beautiful qualities in so many students. So Linda, I want you to meet our wonderful panel here, and then I said too, like, you know, I know we're talking about education now, but education as we have known it for so many years is still very important as well. So if you can take us back through a short version of your journey as you becoming a teacher, and there are certain schools that made a real impression on you, and I want you to share those stories. You have to unmute yourself, Linda.
There I go. I was very careful to stay muted for a while so I could listen to all of the others and hear some of their great stories and more up-to-date stories than I can give you. But yeah, my story goes back a long ways to the early 70s when I began teaching. And I guess teaching was always something I wanted to do, as it came up as a recurring theme for me. Somebody once told me it was because I saw things in it that I thought could be done better, so I decided I would go and try and do it. I'm not sure if I did, but I started out with a degree in math and science and began teaching in the early 70s. And my first job was in an inner city school. And being a suburban kid that knew nothing about nothing, the first couple of years, I probably learned as much as I taught, without a doubt. There were times were tough, and I thought they should be paying me double, and other days where I thought I should be paying them for what I learned. And it was a quick lesson to realize that, as well as having to know all the things about content and all the things about teaching strategies, you also had to know about people. And you learned quickly about the influence of culture. It was a multicultural area with many immigrants, some of them coming as refugees. I knew nothing about their backgrounds, but boy, did I have to catch up in a hurry, because it was important for us to build relationships. And I just listened to a presentation yesterday, and it was basically on trust. And I was taken back to those early days, because the premise of this presentation was that trust is the single most important factor that is cited among people talking about who they will choose to work for or who they will choose to deal with in various things in life. And that certainly probably was one of my first lessons in school, was that I needed to build relationships with kids and find out where they were coming from and find out what the situation we were in together looked like from their shoes. And as I did that, things got easier. And I think I was able to make them easier for kids too. I was really gratified to hear the comments about, I shouldn't say gratified because they were horrific details, but the comments about mental health issues. It doesn't take long, it has never taken long in education to realize that that's a huge factor in terms of helping kids cope and deal with things, and that there are many, many things going on in kids' lives that aren't just the traditional things that come under the school heading. And I think talking about some of those and advocating for help in those areas is absolutely fundamental. I spent a couple of years, as they say, in an inner city school, and then I moved out to the burbs and met you. And it was, I mean, you and I both know those were wonderful days. It was a very protected little shell we lived in, and we're able to accomplish all kinds of things. But again, it was getting to know kids and finding out about them and getting to know families that made a big difference. And one of the best things that happened to me was a parent coming in and saying, "Thank you for what you've done for my kid, but thank you for your values. I was glad my kids were exposed to you." Holy smoke. that wasn't the part I knew that I thought I was working on bringing to the classroom. And it wasn't probably till I had my own kids that I realized how really, really important that was. I like to say I went back and forth. I was very fortunate in my career going from higher needs schools to not so high needs schools. And I learned that each has their personality, each has their culture, and each has something to learn from the other one. And I was able to take things back and forth and try and share some things that I hoped would make kids a little bit better equipped when they went out into the world. My last school was probably my favorite. I went into an extremely high needs school that was really struggling, and I spent time there trying to develop a staff and work with them and work with the community who really, somebody said, that community won't help you the way some of the communities you worked in. And I discovered that they wanted to help, some of them didn't know how. So there was a whole different level of work with the community to help people and realize how many strengths they could bring to the table too, and how they could work as partners. And that led ultimately to my moving to a job in the board office in the first St. Vital School Division and then Louis Riel School Division. And I spent 12 years there as an assistant superintendent. And again, trying to, I guess the most fun of it all was trying to work with people, getting to know people, and looking at how you could bring them what they needed and link them up with resources that would help them help kids. The ultimate customers are always our kids. And that's such a huge component. But in order for kids to get all that they need, you have to empower and support teachers. You have to empower and invite parents to the table to be partners. And it's a people business, and it's a close contact business where you are working to create the conditions and provide everybody with a desire to be a leader in it. I think we have some students on your team tonight, and they're exercising some great leadership skills and are saying that they have learned some even through the pandemic. And I think it's all about leadership, no matter which group you look at, but it's also about working together. And those are the things I've learned. I've been retired for over 12 years now. When I left, I said I was becoming part of the cheering section. And much as I'm very, very glad that I was not on the front lines during the pandemic, I've also been very grateful that I've had the opportunity to continue to watch and to be part of the cheering section and as much as possible be a vocal advocate for education moving ahead and being supportive and doing all the things that we need it to do for kids to leave public school with the tools that they need to move on and make a contribution to the world and enjoy their lives.
Wow. Well, I want to come back to you again, Linda, because I want to learn more about this Bill 64. I read a little bit today. I see some smiles. Susie, you had your son's graduation, and you told me, yes, it's in the playground or whatever, social distance, and they have a set time that they can come and get their diploma. What was that like?
Well, I think it's a testament to teachers and to just how they are so dedicated to doing whatever they can to make things as normal as possible as they can for these kids that are graduating this year. And it was hard in the sense that, of course, he wanted to be with his friends, but I think that when they were playing online that afternoon, they were all chatting about what their 5-minute session was and when they got their diploma, and they were just doing the best that they can to be kids. And it was a difficult celebration. It was a low-key celebration, but we also booked their second vaccinations this week, so that gives me hope as well. And I think that, as we've always said, as we do virtual Hue, that people are doing the best that they can with what they've got,
Yeah. Well, and then how was family life too? Because you had to do the whole pivoting. You had all of your kids at home. They all needed the laptops. They all needed the Wi-Fi and the internet. It's although yes, there we do have privilege, but it is still really hard.
Oh yeah, I think it's been hardest on my youngest. She definitely wants to go back to in class. She misses her friends. She misses face to face. The older ones adjusted a bit better, but adjust is not the right word for it, right? Like they dealt with it, I guess is the better way to say it. So I think that yeah, and absolutely you're right. We are fortunate enough to have Wi-Fi. We were fortunate enough that the kids had able access to computers and things like that, and not everyone has that. And I think that again, that goes back to the inequities that became really apparent during this pandemic, and especially when it came to technology and kids having equal access to getting their schoolwork done and even just connecting to their classes. I think that that should give us pause for future planning and resource planning in terms of internet access and how we adapt learning for different environments. And I don't think that we can assume that everybody has the same access. So that's a fallacy that I think is floating around out there by the powers that be and people in positions of authority. And that needs to be disavowed, because that's not necessarily the case out there. And so when I think about the single mother who has to go to work or has to go to her job and her kids are at home learning by themselves, that is not the same as what I'm dealing with. I'm able to work from home. Not everyone is. And there are challenges for just childcare, even, we need a national childcare program. This pandemic has proved that, and not just for for school age children, but for before and after, and all of those things that go into play. And we're seeing that now, even with summer camps this summer. Parents, I can see online already, people are scrambling, thinking, "What am I going to do with these kids in the summer? Because I need to put them somewhere. I still have to work." So those challenges are not going away, and we need to address the underlying issues that lead to those inequities.
Yeah, most certainly. Yes, I know summer camps. Well, here we are, almost like what, a day and a half before we can reopen. Things will open up, somewhat. Rana, you have relatives that are teachers. You've seen them, lived with them, seen what they've gone through. And your observations on the toll that it's taken on them.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that, we're so lucky to have the virtual chat throughout the pandemic to, kind of, chronologically see how they were moving through their journey as teachers. And at the beginning, there was a little bit of hope, and as time went on, it was much more difficult. The levels of stress, the absolute fear, the fact that the teachers were not one of the first groups of people vaccinated when we were sending children, hundreds of children at times, in series, in different cohorts at a time. Like, I know my sister was seeing, I don't know how many kids, and sometimes, just like Susie said, a kid could have a cough and mom can't keep them home, so a kid is actually sick and going to school, and you have these teachers who can barely force some of the kids to even put a mask on. You see what I'm saying? So there was a lot. So it was quite upsetting. But I was speaking to a school, Bruce Middle School. They had this really amazing, like, they had a bunch of leaders on and a bunch of different people on, and we were just kind of talking to all the kids and just having a lot of fun with them via Zoom, and some were in class. And I was just mentioning to them, despite all of this, You know, like there's a lot of history that's been made throughout this. Like there's a lot of history that's been made, and you know, when people talk about these days, hopefully it will be in through a lens that is going to start to kind of filter down to the reality of what teachers actually go through on a day-to-day basis. These expectations that, and I'm sorry, I'm just speaking from like, you know, and it's not just my family, obviously. Like I know we know a lot of people who are in the education, but you know, the expectation that teachers are, you know, the doctors, the nurses, the psychologists, everything under the sun, every single day when they go to school. I mean, no, sorry, you know, that's not their role, that's not their job. You know, they're there to teach your children something, and both parties have, you know, a responsibility to make sure kids are coming to school equipped. But like Susie said, when you have parents stretched so thin, and they're unable to do what they have to do on their end, or they are doing all that they can do, but they're just, you know, they don't have the access or the technology or whatever resources they require just due to inequalities. You kind of have this system that is just kind of the self-perpetuating system that will never work. So you have a few different categories that have to be resolved. You know, always a shout out to the teachers. You know, we're talking about education, we're talking about school. I refuse to not mention the fact that you know, that there were 715 babies found on residential schools by people who are supposed to be teachers. The list goes on and on. I mean, obviously, I'm wearing orange shirt. Obviously, I have one hung outside my house, have one hung outside my car. I would simply encourage people to, that's the bare minimum. That's the bare minimum, right? To just show some solidarity. There's a lot of families who are reeling right now, just absolute trauma. So I hope that the teachers and all these people who are teachers and they know that responsibility that they hold every day. Could you imagine ever having that type of thing happen to your child or your students? Probably not, right? So I hope everyone's self-reflecting during this time, especially when we're thinking about education, because they're very much related. Sorry, that's all I'm going to say about that. But you know, I do have to jump off earlier, but I just want to give a shout out to all the teachers, you know, and for all you did, and for the support and the beauty that you guys showed, and the patience through all the government challenges, and through all the different bills and all that nonsense. You guys are the absolute amazing, most amazing humans, you know. So I salute you always.
We love you, Rana. You
Okay,
always speak
I'm
from the
gonna jump
heart.
off. It was really nice seeing everybody.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that's definitely another, you know, thing to ponder on. And Linda, you know, so eloquently said that she learned so much from the kids and then tried to teach it and spread it onwards. Let's talk about mental health, because that is a big proponent too of education, and I think that should be first and foremost in our education. But Robin and Charlotte, that's your peer support people. You share lived experience. How important do you see it now? We've heard from Fiona. You know, she says things are really bad. You know, how important would peer support work for students and teachers?
Well, I don't think it's just students and teachers. I think there's a big component with families too, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's Charlotte's side of our business. But like having developed some youth peer support stuff with youth for youth, not just some old person going, here, let's develop this for you. And I think it's critical. Like we just came off of running some training for a youth organization, and there was a stack of young people there. I think the youngest may have been 16, you know, until like they were kind of ranging late teens, early 20s, and looking at them talk about the camaraderie that they got to be able to share their experiences with other kids who had some skills, like when we train them about how do you share your story without like re-traumatizing others, was just I think it's critical. I'm like, why are we not doing this? The research says peer support decreases people's like hospitalizations, decreases use of services, increases people's coping skills. Like, I'm like, it's not rocket science. I've got some research where kids before peer support and adults, you know, had lots of like what people may call negative emotions, worried, alone, hopeless. After peer support, they were happy, felt more optimistic, and the stats are huge. I'm like, this is not rocket science. And I mean, we looked at doing some peer support for teachers last year, and we had some free stuff up, and teachers were saying, we don't have time. We're scratching ourselves trying to like pivot and turn. We'd love to be able to talk to each other, but we just don't have the capacity or time. That's what I heard again and again and again. And I think, you know, if we're going to look at it, we have some time now when to actually take a think and build for the future. And I think that's one of the frustrations for me. We never built for the future. We never built for the resilience of kids and teachers. Not that we ever dreamt a pandemic would come, but we didn't build that in. And then all of a sudden the world exploded and everyone went, oh, what do we do now? And people were just so busy trying to catch up day to day with the changes. I'm hoping that we have some capacity to build for the future now, and build structures in education that support whatever happens in the future. And I know, you know, and I'm sure Charlotte will say about this too, I love the fact that we're at least starting to do some stuff about like teaching kids resilience and, you know, things like this, and the thrival packs, or I forget what they're specifically called. That's great, but don't forget the parents. The parents are the ones that kids go home to, and families are all like, what do I do now? So I'm going to throw it to Charlotte because I know she's passionate, but I'm completely passionate about building a system where peer support's everywhere, but it's built by the kids for the kids with some support if they want it, and by teachers for teachers, and by parents for parents.
Charlotte.
You know, I'm still smiling from we literally just got off a call with our last training with this youth group, and we had family peer workers too, because they see the value in training both the youth and the family. And the growth having family peer workers on the call as well as the youth peer workers, because the family peer workers got to see what the individuals were saying. The individuals got to start hearing what the family perspective was, and the dialogue that came from that was amazing. Robin and I talk a lot about, you know, I like to call it the parallel process. When one person in your family is struggling, how it affects every member of the family. And we're just putting it all on the person, you know, with the mental health challenge, and not taking a look at how all of us play a role in that, our family's mental health story. So the aha moments through the 20 sessions of this training were like, and but one of the things Robin and I are really, really proud of is the growth, the family part of our business, and people now seeing the impact that having family, more family support, because the family is the one that's supporting, you know, on a 24/7 basis, the person who's struggling in the family. So we actually and it's just coming to be, but we've created a nonprofit called All in Family Peer Support, because we've had so many organizations come forward and say, we want to support you in your dream of supporting the family. So it's just finishing getting its charity status and nonprofit. So it's all about supporting families. So Fiona, you and I will be chatting about what that looks like and the impact it's having. Like, we have support groups that we run for families. We do one-on-one for families, and the change in the family stories, like, that we're hearing, the difference that it's making, it's incredible. So I can't talk enough about more supports for family, and especially now more than ever, because we're seeing so many families that are struggling.
No, I know. Well, and that is definitely going to help, I think, moving forward, because what is school going to look like in the fall? Hopefully it's going to be back. Will it be normal? I don't think so. For Felicity and Dami, and then maybe Judy Ann, you can chime in too. What is normal to you? what would that be for you, Dami? Like, it would be just like walk like back in, no mask, everybody hanging out, or do you think that's
I
going
don't
to be
think
it?
I know what normal is anymore. Like, I feel like now I have my anxiety going back, because like now I'm so used to like being by myself alone in my room all day. Now I have to like talk to people again, and it's like stressful. Like, I used to talk to a lot of people before. Like, I used to be very social, and now I feel like I don't know how to get back to that anymore. Like, me out of anybody wants to like go back to what normal was. I feel like emotionally I'm not ready to go back to normal, because I'm so used to sitting on my laptop talking to people. Now I have to talk to them face to face all the time. And yeah, it's stressful. Yeah,
Wow.
but like normal is going to school and not worrying that maybe if you sit close to someone for too long, you're gonna catch something, or if someone is coming to school, where it's like that anxiety will be gone when it comes to like new normal.
How about for you, Felicity? Well, you already expressed your anxiety of not only moving away, but you're going to be in university with thousands, hopefully, of students.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like normal is kind of, it really depends on the person you're asking. Like, what does normal look like for you? And for me, normal looks like productivity. Before all this started, I was always, in terms of school, I know I was always on top of my academics. But for some reason during the pandemic, it was fine at first, but then as it progressed, I found that I would sometimes exhibit signs and symptoms of burnout. I would find myself procrastinating more and more, and I couldn't understand why. I kept trying to think, oh, I'm supposed to be more productive now because I'm just at home. I don't have to think about traveling or like getting ready to go out. But in reality, it's really, really hard to be productive sometimes, especially when you're just at home. And when you're at home, you don't really have that work brain on, right? Like, you're not programmed to be as productive as you are. And especially for myself, I don't exactly live in a house where I have my own room or I have my own set working space. And so it's easier to be in that mindset or like actually be ready to work. And so for me, normal is, of course, I don't want to be worrying about whether I'll be in a life or death situation every single time I go out or go to school. As much as I love going to school, but I think just being productive again and being in that go 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 mindset again, I'm able to accomplish what I want to accomplish and what I feel like I should accomplish in order to feel like a normal person again. And I just want to say, like, I just want to give a shout out to Robin, Charlotte, and Fiona, and also Linda. I really appreciate the work and focus you put into mental health because where I come from, I'm a new immigrant. I've only been in Canada for 3 years, and so in my culture in the Philippines, we don't really put an emphasis on mental health anywhere, and especially in education. And I know that for myself and for my friends, that's a huge setback. And it poses so many problems, unseen problems, and unaddressed problems. And so it's really nice to see that it's actually being taken seriously and there's concrete action being taken here. And so normal for me, I would like to have, for everyone really, I think that we should normalize mental health support and we should definitely have more of it. It should be more widespread. And just feel like that would, put so much, it would improve our not only education system, but really our society so much. Should we just like think about that more? So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Felicity. Dami, did you want to say something?
Felicity was, oh yeah, Felicity was like on point. Um, it's really hard for like immigrant like children to come here and then like like you said, like back, like for me, mental health was never talked about. If you're having mental issues, you're weak and you don't want to be weak. And like for so many years, I thought maybe like there was something like wrong with me because like in school, like back home, they give you like so much work. Like I remember getting home at like 3 and still doing homework to like 10, and I wasn't able to be a child, if that make any sense. And then I came here and I had choices on what I could do, and I had like privileges and I had freedom, not like freedom of like, but like I had freedom to like enjoy childhood. And then now learning about myself and what I need mental health wise was very eye opening because it was like, oh, that was oh, that was what was wrong with me. Like that's very normal to be anxious and have anxiety. But it was never taught, so it's like I the only weird one. So like
Oh, we're kind of losing your internet, Dami.
it was like thank you to all the teachers that have like if you feel stressed. Hear me?
Yes, I think you're getting better.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
there you go.
sorry. I don't know what's going on. I'm using it, but it's asleep. But like yeah, Felicity was right. It was very great to talk to teachers and meet teachers who actually cared about my mental health and was ready to help me get through problems and anxiety that I had. So like Felicity said, thank you to like all the teachers that put mental health first because it really helped me like figure it out and be more focused on my education.
Well, thank you so much, Dami. That's what we're here for, is for you to listen and to help. Judy Ann, quickly too, I mean, we talked about students and now the teachers. Normalcy.
With my support role, I think, well, I actually attended one of Fiona's workshops for our division, and I always have in my bag now just like a bag of Starburst, like individually wrapped Starburst. She told us about the process of chewing and how that just helps you to calm down. So whenever I just kind of pivoted, and my last block in particular, I was focusing just on numeracy. That's what the school had wanted. But as we had to make that shift, I remember talking to at a staff meeting and saying, well, I'm here to support you. And they're nodding their head, and I said, and I mean support you, like it doesn't have to be math. And there was just this collective sigh of relief. And so what I had done was I had just created an office hours time at the end of the day for me that they knew where to find me. And they would come in and, typically they'd have a question to start off with related to teaching. And it kind of went from there to become more about what they needed as an educator, right? So it wasn't just about the pedagogy. And I tell them like, yes, of course it's important, but you need to be at your best self in order to even think about that next step, right? So we do a lot of focusing on like, how can I help you? Like, it's not about the math right now. It's not about literacy. Like, what do you need to make this easier for you at this time? So my normal has kind of shifted to that. Whereas before the pandemic, I actually began this role just in 2020. So I had to even make that pivot in March from my own role. But when I began, my biggest problem was, being a grade 4, 5, 6 teacher for the bulk of my career, suddenly coming in, I was supporting nursery, kindergarten. And my biggest issue was, how do I help these really, really, really little people? Like they're so young and they're so excited, but I just did not have the energy. Like I didn't know how to do that. And looking back now, I'm like, what a privilege that was. That was my biggest problem, was how do I shift teaching practices for nursery? How do I teach literacy in nursery? But for now, just shifting to, what is it that students need, families need? What is it that the teachers need? And even beyond that, a lot of my meetings have been with administrators, and they have so much on their plate. It's unbelievable. And so even just giving them time to just sit and just talk and just bounce ideas off of each other, that's been really helpful, I find. But it's a lot of looking at the support staff that they have in the building too, right? What do people need? It has kind of been my big question as I'm coming into schools and working with people.
Wow, how things have changed. I see Linda, you're busy writing. She laughs. And then I want to bring Fiona into this too. So tell us, Bill 64, I go walking for walks and I see all these signs saying no to Bill 64, no, 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 no. And I'm going, because my kids aren't in school. Fill us in. Oh, you're on mute again.
Thank you for the reminder. I'm not an expert by any stretch. I've probably read some of the same things you have. I'm trying to keep in the loop. I certainly have contact with a lot of people who are still involved in teachers, both friends and close family. But as I attended one of the regional meetings for the group that put together the recommendations that came before Bill 64, I was surprised at how I got us, well, maybe I wasn't surprised, but I got a sense that there was already some plans as to where this was going to go. And it wasn't, I didn't feel that the input around the table was necessarily input that was going to make a great deal of change. And ironically, the predictions I made afterward were pretty much what I saw to some degree when I saw the documents. I guess the big thing that Bill 64 does is remove school boards. Certainly I worked with lots of board members through the years and didn't always agree with what they said, but I got to watch the process. I came to realize that they were representatives of the community. I like to think I was too, because I lived in the community, but they were elected representatives. They were there because they cared about what happened to their community. They were there, and I know they spent hours and hours listening to people and on the phone, because they were the first place to go if somebody was really worked up about something. They spend a lot of time in their careers becoming educated on how to work as a board, how to work with people, what's going on with education. I saw at least one of them get a master's in education because of interest in it from working with the board. And it's a pretty steep learning curve at times. All in all, I came to respect and admire the people that took the time out of their lives and spent much, much, much more time than I think they were ever monetarily compensated for, working on education in their community and getting to know their community. So I think the whole notion of moving decision-making further away from the community leaves me with lots of concerns. I have a hard time seeing that as positive. I'm also concerned that there doesn't seem to be a lot of hard and fast fact going along with it. When I read the first description of Bill 64, a lot of the things that they mentioned that they might do were already being done. I think they talk about parents having some input in hiring teachers and principals. Well, if you read it carefully, input in the process, yes. And that's always been, that was something when I was working. I can remember going out and meeting with parent councils and saying, you're going to have a new principal next year. Tell me about the qualities that are going to fit your school. And tell me about what you would like a principal to be able to do. Give me some ideas as to what we should be looking for that you see from your point of view. I think some of what I heard advertised made it sound like they were going to, parents were now going to be involved in the direct hiring and the direct evaluating and so on. That kind of flies in the face of some of the stuff in the Constitution of Canada and to some of the privacy legislation that's out there. It's a little bit of a sleight of hand, I think, in some of the conversation. I don't think there's a lot of substance out there. When they're questioned on it, suddenly there's a new committee that's being formed. I think if you're going to make changes, the committee should come
First.
you know, the cart before the horse before the cart, if you will. And I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing a lot of preparation. The simplest one is they announced they're going to eliminate school boards and save $40 million that they can put into frontline classroom. I look at numbers of school boards and numbers of trustees. And when I figure the number of trustees that we have and the fact that they make under $20,000 a year, any way I work it out, I can't. When I tried to inflate every figure, if you eliminated all the trustees that you're going to have, at most, you're going to get $5 or $6 million, if that. I doubt it. So if they'd come up with this figure, it should have come from somewhere. And when people ask them about where it came from, they should be able to tell you. I just am feeling that a lot of this is coming out of perhaps the same place, and maybe I'm shaken because of the healthcare situation we have, but I think a lot of this is coming out of the need to save money. And I'm really concerned when they start talking about, looking for places that do things cheaper than we do. I think one of the earlier speakers made mention of the fact that Manitoba has some very specific needs in terms of suicide rates and poverty rates and such. And I think going out to just get the cheapest model we can find is perhaps going to really do our kids a disservice. I'm concerned that there hasn't been a lot of consultation with people who have educational backgrounds. I think there is incredible amounts of wisdom out there in our educators and in our superintendents, and I'm going to sound biased for saying that, superintendents departments, in our teachers, in all of those people who have education expertise. I think there needs to be some consultation done there. And I'll go back and tell you that, when I mentioned earlier that if trust is a fundamental, again, this session I listened to yesterday talked about that the components of trust that they wanted to draw my attention to were compassion, character, competency, commitment, connection, contribution, and consistency. And I think I could go down that list and say that for some of the things that I am reading that seem somewhat incomplete, other than at the financial level and the control level, I've got doubts in many of those levels. I think, I'm not saying that we don't need to change education. I don't think the mental health supports are there to the level we need at this point. I think we need to constantly be trying to build those bridges between various kinds of communities and in schools and figure out how to work together. I think we need to look at funding and how it's doled out. Some of the funding formulas are a gazillion years old. Are they the right ones to make sure that everybody gets the right dollars to take care of the kids that need to be taken care of? I think in terms of planning, I mean, curriculum is always a moving target. You know, we forget that's one of the main fundamentals of education, and yet sometimes we don't even get to it. I look at the importance of preparation for our kids that are going to go on to post-secondary education. What are we doing to make sure that the curriculum is as strong as it can be? How do we make sure it can all be done? We keep throwing things at school and say, you know, add this on, or that crisis happened, let's add this in, let's add that in. The comment about teachers don't even have time to talk to one another, that's very real. I watched some teachers struggle with the whole virtual learning. Depending on where you are in your career, that might have been a real challenge. But in the world of today, sometimes you don't have the time to keep up with those things. Some of them got the fast track, and I know that increased their stress as well. Others are finding it's great, but you know, how do you address things like that? How does professional development move along? How do you evaluate things as you go along? The conversation again about more standardized testing. That's just anybody who's been in a classroom or near a classroom knows that evaluating where kids are at can't be done with multiple choice pencil and paper tests at all times. It's much broader than that. It's much bigger than that. And it's got to be within a context of the fact that we have all kinds of kids in our classrooms who are going to a multitude of different vocations in their future. And things have to be adjusted as you go along to make sure that there's a fit for all of them. Because we always tend to look at either, you know, helping one area or another. We got to help them all, and we've got to make sure that they all have a route to go and a plan to head to A, be successful and happy themselves, and B, to make the contributions that we all need. I think the pandemic was a great leveler in showing us that people that were doing jobs that some of us would have said, oh, that's not such a big deal. That's a lower paid job. It's not important. Some of those became of the utmost importance during the pandemic. And I would argue that they are all the time. We've just recognized it now.
Yeah.
So I think I worry about the shallowness of what I'm reading in this, and the fact that it's bypassing incredible banks of educational expertise. And I think that the local focus with people from the community who care very much and who commit to working really hard, and to just sort of say, that's not a big deal, is concerning. And then when you look at the way they're putting things together, when I look at you know, a school division, when you list their 15 areas, the fact that one of them has a little over 2,000 students and another one has a little over 100,000, it doesn't hang together for me.
Wow.
I have concerns. I'm not saying I don't want changes. I'm not saying that education shouldn't be constantly evolving, because yes, it should.
Wow.
But I think there's a more thoughtful level. I'm not confident enough that having a politician or two overlook it and pass that down the line. I worry about how many steps that makes for communication for people that have a concern. I worry about how many steps there might be just to get the jobs done, how much paperwork, and how many pieces of paper you have to fill out to get a package of foolscap. If everything is
Oh, well, thank you. Oh, my goodness. Well, okay. So Linda has definitely expressed her fears, and that, I guess, kind of takes me like a round robin question to all of you panelists. What is one or two or maybe three of your biggest fears in the education system, regardless of Bill 64, or it could be that. Fiona, we know mental health, but how do we make that? And maybe you have some more fears.
Well, I guess one of the things that I was thinking as I was listening to everyone talk, and I mean, we have really hard data on this now. So out of the University of Winnipeg, Dr. Sokol and her team did a study on Canadian teachers and specifically Manitoban teachers. And I think that, you know, it's incumbent upon us to really look at that. And that report, you know, really focused even on, you know, Robin, you were talking about peer support. It's about organizational change. It's about making space. So it's not, Fiona, you're having a hard time because of this pandemic, you're anxious or depressed, you go fix you. It's not about that. It's about recognizing that everybody, families, educators, our students, that everybody will be dealing with the trauma of COVID. And, you know, Felicity, you were saying, and Dami, I think you were both talking a little bit about not having motivation at times. And I'm at home. Well, that's a traumatic response to hard stuff, right? That is trauma, right? And that is how we respond to it. So how it is looking. So when I think about my fears are that we're not going to look at, we already have so much data, you know, in the province, even now I'm getting called to do, you know, evaluations on Thrival, evaluations on other projects. And, you know, they want to cut costs. And I just said, you can't afford to cut costs right now. And in fact, we need more because all of these like tier 1 programs are amazing, but we also need some tier 3. We don't have enough supports in our province to catch those of us that are struggling the most. They're not there. They are not there. I think we might have 13 psychiatric beds for youth. That number might be different, but many of those were even taken away from because of COVID. So my fears for education is mental health is a barrier to learning, right? And when we're not well, we're not going to be learning. And that's our educators, that's our leaders, that's our families. And it needs a holistic response. It needs a human response. This is a human issue, right? And it's not something that, you know, this is not a political, like this is a human response, you know, and I think we need to do that. And so making space, I hope that, you know, instead of just talking about my fears, I guess I want to talk about my hopes because it kind of talks about that. I hope we're going to heed the warnings that we have, that we're going to look at our data, that we're going to create that space that provides meaningful support and change. We were in a mess in this province pre-COVID. I can't even tell you what it's going to look like. We can't even find a lot of kids, and that's the truth. Nobody's talking about it, but we're missing a lot of kids, right? And there's a lot of systems, you know, we're working really hard to work together. I know a couple of folks we've been talking about, like this isn't education responding to education. This is every system responding to education, to child welfare, to mental health, to justice, because they all trickle into one another, right? Yeah. So how can we come together? How can we support? If we don't support our educators, we're screwed. I'm sorry, that's not a very nice clinical term, but that's just the truth. I had another word that started with an F, but I thought I'd be good and not say that.
But that's all good here. But no, wow, that's
we have
crazy.
To support them.
That's heartbreaking. Missing children, like, wow.
Well, they're just not at school, right?
And you don't know. Yeah.
And you're calling a child welfare agency, and they can't go to a home because of COVID, right? So it is, and nobody's talking about this stuff. There is so many things that our province is not talking about that are appalling. Absolutely appalling. And, you know, we have the highest rate of, you know, victimization in Canada too, because our kids are being like online sexual exploitation. Nobody wants to talk about that because when our kids are given, you know, their stuff, you know, as parents, you hope and pray that they're doing their schoolwork. You don't know. I don't know what the heck my kids are doing. I'd love to say I did. I don't. I hope that they're doing schoolwork. I don't know that, right? And so now we're seeing these high rates of sexual exploitation of our kids. It's created a perfect storm. And I really don't want to be a Debbie Downer. Have we seen amazing resilience? Absolutely we have. But this has caused, so my fears, this has caused some pieces that are going to be very hard to come back on. And also people talk about returning to normal. Do you know how hard that is again, especially for folks who have, you know, anxiety disorders, social phobias, things like that. Like now, you know, some people have actually blossomed in this, fake reality kind of, right? Because they haven't had to go out and all the folks, you know, who are already struggling with germs, things like that. Now this is just going to be exacerbated for a long time. So I think it's going to take a long time to get back to normal, if there ever was such a thing, right? So I just hope that we could do our best to be kind and to be human and to do the right thing, which isn't always the easy thing. I think that, you know, the government doing Bill 64 was kicking people when they were down. Like, you took a group of people who were already at their very wits end, trying their very best every day, and then dropped a massive bomb like that. And I mean, I think that just sets the stage and tells you exactly where, you know, how those folks are being thought of or treated.
Wow. I mean, you're right. Things, we need to start talking more. Felicity and Dami, hopes and fears.
Personally, I feel like, you know, the biggest thing that I've noticed, you know, when I got here and got into the education system, I always couldn't help but compare it to how it was back in my country, because that's the only, you know, that's what my lived experience is, and I can't help but compare it all the time. And one thing that I noticed is sometimes there is a lack of voice from the students. So I would say that this happens in the classroom, like when we have discussions in class. I don't feel like there's a lot of push for inclusion for the students' voices too. You know, what do you think about this issue? Or like, what's your stance on this? That's not as there's not as much of a space for that, and that also extends outside of the classroom. And for your personal needs or your personal where you feel you need support, we aren't, like, personally, this is just my experience. I know I don't speak for everyone, but I don't think I have a lot of you know, I don't feel like I have a real connection with some of the systems that we have in school. Like, I'm not every individual student is asked, okay, so what do you think what do you think you need help with? You know, we don't have that kind of we're not able to give as much feedback as we want to. Like, sure, we have an end of the year survey, like, what do you think the school should have? But I think that we should have that for every class, for every what do you call this? Every I don't know I'm not sure how to say it in English, but every facility that the school has to offer, like, those aren't evaluated as much. And so I feel like change really starts in those small ways. Of course, you know, big bills like Bill 60, Bill 64, I think. Of course, that has change, that affects change into the education system. But also, I think just starting small and hearing what students have to say, and what, you know, people who are actually on the ground have to say, why that is so important. It's because those are the people who are mostly affected by those changes, by those big bills. And yeah, so I also agree with Linda, like, voices of the community definitely matter, and we should be, especially during times like this, they should be the ones you should be listening to.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like, adding to what Felicity said, like, it's just that if your teacher isn't happy, especially like since they stretch themselves so thin, like if your teacher aren't happy, I feel like the quality of your education goes down. Imagine, you know, your teachers thinking about, you know, how am I gonna pay the rent this, you know, this month because it's wasn't paying well. And I feel like that will affect the energy in the classroom. Teachers should be taken care of like as they should. If they're taking care of the whole future in their hands, I feel like we should give them the respect that they deserve. I'm so sorry. With those, yeah, I'm sorry that took me off guard. But my fears is that I feel like I'm not ready for university because I feel like school just flipped upside down, that now I feel like I'm not ready to face university anymore. Like, I had big hopes in grade 11 and I was ready to like take on university, but like now it's just that I don't think I'm ready to do that yet, especially when we're doing it like online. Yeah, that's sorry. I had a whole thing in my head, but now it's gone with the noise. Sorry.
No worries. And if it comes back, just wave a hand and we'll get back to you. Judy Ann.
I think for me, kind of echoing on what Fiona was mentioning, and even what Dami was saying just now, the teacher burnout piece. I have been in schools, again, like inner city, north, south, and it's the same thing. I walk in there, they all look like deer in headlights when I'm in their classrooms. And these are everything from brand new teachers all the way up to teachers who I know are in their retirement year. They have, a week and a half to go, but you can tell that they are exhausted. I've seen the tears going into your car to cry at lunch. I've seen that. People coming to see me with a question about math, how to teach math, but it ends up, I always have my tissue box with me and my Starburst because I'm ready to help them because I know it's going to lead to more, and to really give them that time to talk. But not all schools have that type of support in house. And even with my role, I only have 6 weeks in a school where I'm supporting them, and we look at that model too. Like, should it be extended? Should it be less so that we see more schools? And it's tricky. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. But what I'm seeing across the board is, I was talking to in my last block, I had a student teacher who ended up taking over for the rest of the term when she was able to, and so this was her very first experience as a classroom teacher on her own. And I told her, like, being a first year teacher is already a struggle in and of itself. It's very tough. And now you're doing this in what feels like everything's on fire. And this is how you're learning, and you don't know any other way to do it. So, it's a lot of thinking about starting your career that way or ending your career that way. I think we're at a risk of losing a lot of talented folks because they are finding out either that this is not for them or that they don't have strategies to cope because it's never been really discussed and shared. Like I've mentioned earlier, I had the privilege of being in one of Fiona's professional development sessions, but not everyone does. So we do our best to pay forward what we do know and what we learn, but not everyone has access to learning about how to cope and how to deal, how to communicate, and how to be healthy for themselves, and even how to prioritize that. So that's my biggest fear is the teacher burnout piece, because it's very, very real. And my hope is that people do have access to resources and strategies and learn different ways to be able to help alleviate that for them and find ways to cope and ways to healthily cope with the situations that they're in.
Oh, thank you so much, Judy Ann. So Robin and Charlotte, maybe you can add some hope to this?
Sorry, I giggled. The hope piece for me is that we do hear, like, people starting to hear youth voices more. Like, for me, I'd love to say by us, for us, that youth actually get to design it. But I think what I'm hoping for at the moment is nothing about us without us, that the system starts to include youth in all of the discussions about what it looks like, because we don't listen enough to youth. And so the hopeful piece is I do hear, I hear tonight, like, people starting to want to hear those voices or have heard them in the past. And I think if we can get a groundswell of that, then maybe it will end up in where the people who make some of the bigger decisions provincially wide will actually start to listen and not be tokenistic, because I know there's lots of advisory committees and stuff, and we go, oh, we'll have youth, we'll have teachers, and then it's like, oh, I heard what they said, but I'm not doing that. And my hope is that we actually start to hear the voices of people who live and breathe and work in the system and go to school or have just come out and share their experiences and they're heard. So my hope is that is starting to change, and it will continue to change. And maybe that's naive, but I'm going to live in my naivety and keep pushing from where I sit, that it's nothing about us without us until it's by us, for us.
Good. Charlotte, anything to add on that?
My head goes for the teachers. I reached out to a few of my friends who are teachers to talk with you on this, and they're just so exhausted, and they just said, I don't have the capacity to spend a Thursday night and do this. I just don't. So my hope is that this summer they really take some time for themselves and take care of themselves, and whatever that looks like. So because I don't want them to lose the hope of why they became a teacher in the 1st place, because they had hopes and dreams when they chose this profession, and I don't want them to lose that. So that's where my head goes. um, and I hope, like a few of them, they said, will you call me in July, because I do want to talk with you. So my hope is that when I call them in July, the world will be a little bit normal and I can go and visit them in their backyard. So that's
Yes.
why.
Well, send them all of our love too. And
Yeah.
lastly, Linda, your hope then maybe. We've talked about your fear. You're still muted. You'll have to unmute yourself.
My hopes are always vested in optimism. I have the good fortune of having seen education grow over 40 years and see it improve, and it has fought through some tough times and come back to grow and move ahead. I think when I hear students talking about that there needs to be more involvement and more listening, and others mentioned that as well. I think that's starting to happen. I'm optimistic that it will keep happening, because I think young people like this are going to demand that it happens. And I think teachers that see success as they're building strong relationships come to value those, and success begets more success, and I would like to see that move along. I'm optimistic that some of the stresses of the pandemic are going to mean that that people look at education, that we're going to grow from it. Some good things happen. Some good things happen in the virtual world. We found out that some kids adapt better than others. For some kids, it was, in some respects, an answer to their learning styles. We have to now figure out, how do we move ahead and keep the good from both before and after, and then make the system better. Anytime there's a shakeup, there's an opportunity for change. Even the governmental stuff. My biggest criticism, as I've said, is I don't think there's enough substance there. I'm thinking this is meaning that people are going to have a good look at education and maybe become more active participants. I would throw out the advice to absolutely everyone to do some reading about Bill 64. Look at things like the Manitoba Teachers Society website. Read the government pages and look at the substance that they have put out. Look at the School Boards Association perspective from it. One of my favorite professional development experiences was something that a day when I was in a session where I really wasn't that impressed, and they ended up doing. I went to a session that the presenter's husband was doing. He was kind of the pit crew, and he ended up talking about, when you have a problem, think about it from different perspectives. And he actually had people stand in a square, and you stood in one position. He'd say, okay, think of your problem. Think of everything for and against it in your mind. He'd say, well, then move to the other side of the square, face the other way. Think about somebody else that's looking at it. Can you think of anything that they would see that you haven't seen? And he had you go the 4 squares. And I think the next square was, think about who you'd phone for advice about this. What do you think they'd say to you? And then the last piece of the square was, okay, does it look any different to you now than it did when you started? And I had just been wrestling with something at school before I left. And it just absolutely blew me away. And it sort of summed up the fact that keeping in mind everybody's perspectives brings a better solution than just trying to muddle through on your own. And I'm hoping that what's coming out of this, my optimism says, let's take a look at absolutely every perspective and try and find the good in all of them, because none of them are all good and none of them are all bad. But let's see if we can take away all of the good and not just live in the past.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Linda. And you know what? We've covered so much. We've learned so much. I would like to see these conversations continue because there's still so much work to be done. But tonight, I really want to thank all of you for coming. Thank you, especially Felicity and Dami, to give us an insight on the youth and continue to have a voice and continue to ask for support and help, because there's so many good people out there. You've met all of these wonderful people tonight. Thank you so much too, Fiona. I know it's a lot of work to be done, and you really kind of opened up a watershed. It's not a pretty picture, but I think that we definitely all as a collective can help. And thank you so much, Judy Ann, too, as well. What you do in the school is amazing. And of course, thank you, Mrs. Baxter, as always. Anyways, okay, have a great reopening weekend, but don't overdo it. But enjoy a little bit more freedom and have a wonderful summer, all of you. So again, we can still say stay safe and healthy. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for watching tonight. Good night.